name is Lucas Nelson, and I will be talking about Chapter 12, which is about social psychology. So here are the pre-presentation questions. They are, what is social psychology primarily focused on? What is fundamental attribution error? What is the just world hypothesis? What is a social role? What is conformity? What is obedience? What is social loafing? And what is an example of a stereotype? So you can pause the video to answer all these, and you probably won't get them all right because we haven't started yet. And I'll reveal the answers in 3, 2, 1. All right. So the first section is, what is social psychology? So what is it? Social psychology is a field of psychology that examines how people affect one another, as well as the gravity of the situations they're put into. So social psychologists will explore the influence of relationships on people's behavior. So there are two types of topics, the intrapersonal topics and the interpersonal topics. The intrapersonal topics pertain to the individual, which includes emotions, attitudes, and cognition. And the interpersonal topics pertain to groups, which can help aggression, discrimination, behavior, and relationships. So the situational and dispositional influence on behavior. Behavior is a product of the situation and the person. So situationism is the view that our behavior and actions are determined by our immediate environment, and dispositionism is a view that our behavior is determined by internal factors. And then an internal factor is an attribute of a person, which includes personality traits and temperament. So often in psychology, social psychology, we'll use both situationism and dispositionism. So the fundamental attribution error, this is very important. This is the tendency to overemphasize that internal factors are the main reason for behavior as opposed to the situational factors. So a person may be angry because they were laid off, not because they are an angry or mean person. So if you see someone walking down the street that's clearly angry, maybe they were just laid off, maybe not, they're not mean. So the Quizmaster study showed this. Its participants were assigned either questioner or contestant. Those were their roles. And then the questioners made difficult questions that they knew, and on average, the participants believed that the questioners were smarter than them because they didn't get questions right that the questioners knew. And then here's the bar graph of what it looked like for the responses. So is the fundamental attribution error a universal phenomenon? That kind of is, but there are differences between cultures for sure. So the individualistic culture is a culture that focuses on individual achievement, and they tend to commit fundamental attribution error more often. On the other hand, there's the collectivistic culture, which focuses on communal relationships with others, and they are less likely to commit fundamental attribution error. So the USA would be an example of individualistic culture, and Asian countries are more often collectivistic cultures. So there's a chart down here. Individualistic culture is achievement-oriented, focuses on autonomy, has a dispositional perspective, is independent, and has an analytic thinking style. On the other hand, collectivistic culture is relationship-oriented, focuses on group harmony, has a situational perspective, is interdependent, and has a holistic thinking style. The actor-observer bias. This is attributing other people's behavior to internal factors and our own to situational factors. So with more information, we are more likely to attribute behavior to situational factors. So a study that showed this asked male participants why they liked their girlfriend and why their friend liked their girlfriend. And the participants provided more situational explanations for themselves and more internal explanations for their friends. And then the bar graph is down here. The self-serving bias. So attribution is a belief about the cause or result, which is kind of what the self-serving bias is about. It's the tendency to explain our successes as dispositional characteristics, but our failures as situational factors. And that protects our self-esteem. So when you win a game of any sport, you might tell yourself that your team is talented, works hard, and uses effective strategies to win. But when you lose, you might tell yourself that the other team is more experienced, the referees were unfair, or the team played at home, giving them a higher chance of winning. The just world hypothesis is the belief that people get the outcomes that they deserve. And this is derived from the belief that the world is a fair place, which obviously it isn't, and it allows us to feel that the world is predictable and we have control over our life outcomes. So people with just world beliefs tend to blame the poor for their poverty, and this is a clear example of fundamental attribution error because there are a lot more factors that go into being impoverished, such as like culture or your family that could play a huge role in why you're impoverished. Second section is self-presentation. So a social role is a pattern of behavior that is expected of a person in a certain setting. And we all have several social roles, and they are defined by culturally shared knowledge. So they're not like written down or anything, but we all just know the roles. And they vary across different settings. So one of our social roles is a student. So a social norm is a group's expectation of what is appropriate for a behavior for its members. So how are we expected to act and what are we expected to wear? So because one of our roles as students, we're expected to act as learners. We're expected to take notes and try to learn. Scripts are a person's knowledge about the sequence of events in a setting. So one example of this would be how do you act when you're at a restaurant, and there are different cultural differences in scripts. So Americans might act different at a restaurant than Brazilians do, and they guide us on how to act. Zimbardo's Stanford Prison Experiment. This one showed the power of social roles, norms, and scripts. And it took place in a mock prison in the basement of a psychology building at Stanford. The participants were assigned a role of either a prisoner or guard, and then in a short period of time, the guards started to harass the prisoners just because of their role. And then the prisoners showed signs of anxiety and hopelessness because the guards were harassing them. And then after 6 days, the experiment had to be shut down, and it was actually planned for it to be a 2-week experiment. This experiment is kind of iffy because it's been recreated a lot of times, and almost none of the recreations have had the same results. So he likely provided specific guidelines, but still the social norms played a large role, likely. The third section is about attitudes and persuasion. So what is an attitude? An attitude is our evaluation of a person, an idea, or an object. And these are normally positive or negative. There are 3 components of an attitude, and that is the affective component, which is your feelings, your behavioral component, which is the effect of the attitude on behavior, and then the cognitive component, which is the belief and knowledge. And these are influenced by both internal and external forces. So cognitive dissonance. It is a psychological discomfort arising from holding 2 or more contradictory thoughts, beliefs, or opinions. So believing cigarettes are bad for you, but still smoking them can cause cognitive dissonance. So this infographic over here, for lack of a better term, shows this as an example. So cognitive dissonance would be caused from believing that smoking is bad for your health, but you are still a smoker. So to remove the dissonance tension, you either have to believe that smoking is bad for your health and then quit smoking, or you can believe that the research is inconclusive and still smoke. So the one on the left, where you believe that smoking is bad for your health, would be changing your behavior because you quit smoking. The other one is changing your beliefs because change your beliefs in that you believe that research is inconclusive, as opposed to what you thought before, which is smoking is bad for your health, and you still are a smoker. The effect of initiation. So the justification of effort suggests that we value goals and achievements more when we put a lot of effort into them. So that means if something is difficult, we believe that it's more worthwhile. And this was shown through the Aronson and Mills experiment, which had college students volunteered to join a campus group, and the participants were assigned either hard, easy, or no initiation. And the students that were in the hard initiation liked the group much more than those with easy or no initiation. So this bar graph on the bottom shows that here. So the difficult initiation is almost double that of the easy and none. Persuasion. So persuasion is the process of changing our attitude towards something because of some kind of communication. So persuasion is everywhere in our everyday life, including advertisements, and there's also a lot of other ways to persuade. So this is an example right here in New York. It's got a bunch of advertisements everywhere, and that's trying to persuade you to buy the products. And then a subfield of social psychology studies persuasion and social influence. The Yale Attitude Change Approach. And this describes the conditions that cause people to change their attitudes. So Hovland showed that certain features will influence the persuasiveness of a message. These features are the features of the source, which is credibility and attractiveness of the speaker, the features of the message, which is subtlety, sightedness, timing, and both sides of the argument, that they present both sides, and features of the audience, which is attention, intelligence, self-esteem, and the age. So the elaboration likelihood model. According to this model, there are two main routes when delivering a persuasive message, and those routes are the central and peripheral routes. So the central route is logic-driven. It uses facts and data to convince people of the argument, and it works best when the audience is analytical and motivated to listen, like they want their opinion to be changed, they want to learn more, and this results in a lasting attitude change. On the other hand is the peripheral route, which uses peripheral cues to associate positivity with the message. And the audience does not need to be analytical or motivated. They don't have to want to learn. And this results in short-term attitude change. So an example of a central route would be like a TED Talk with a really experienced financial person where you learn how to manage your money. And the peripheral route would be like a Coca-Cola advertisement where they show being happy when you have a can of Coke in your hand. Another technique for persuasion is the foot in the door technique. So the persuader gives a small favor, and then they later request a larger favor. And then this works because our past behavior often directs our future behavior, because we like to keep continuity. So participants in a study who agreed to put a small sign in their yard were much more likely to put a large sign in their yard than those who declined putting a small sign in their yard. The fourth chapter is about conformity, compliance, and obedience. Conformity is the change in a person's behavior to go along with the group. So Ash's study had one naive subject and the rest were working with the researcher. And people who are working with the researcher that act as subjects are called confederates. So the subject was to determine which line length matched. So this is pretty obvious. X obviously matches C. But the confederates all gave the wrong answer. So 76% of the participants gave the wrong answer at least once to match with the confederates. And then the Ash effect is the influence of the group majority on an individual's judgment. So factors that make someone more likely to conform to a group. This is the size of the majority. So the greater the majority, the more likely you are to conform. The presence of another dissenter, or someone that's not working with the researcher. So that makes conformity rates drop to nearly zero. And then the public or private nature. So people are more likely to conform when the responses are public than when they're private. And that's why voting is private. So the social influences to conform. There's normative and informational social influences. So normative is when people to conform to fit in, feel good, and to be accepted. And informational social influence is when people conform because they believe the group has the correct information. And Ash's experiment was an example of normative social influence, as well as these pictures here. These people are sitting, being quiet and attentive because they want to fit in, feel good. And these people are dancing, having fun because they're at a concert because of normative social influence. So Stanley Milgram's experiment, this tested obedience, which is the change of an individual's behavior to comply with a demand given by authority. And participants were told to shock the learners who were confederates, so they were in on the experiment, and if they gave the wrong answer on the test. So they give the wrong answer, participants had to shock them. So the participants believed that they were shocking them in 15-volt increments up to 450 volts, which is like nearly lethal, or it might be lethal. And then 65% of the participants shocked the learner at maximum voltage just because they were being obedient to the guy that told them to. Groupthink. This is the changing of opinions of members of a group to agree with what they believe is the group consensus. So this can hinder diverse opinions, which can lead to faulty decisions. And then also, if a leader is directive, it can discourage members from voicing their opinions and disagreeing with the leader. So this is an example. It's kind of ironic, you know? We need more dissenting opinions. I agree. So group polarization. This is the strengthening of an original group attitude after discussion within the group. So it essentially makes the group believe in their values even more. It's just like an echo chamber. So it's argued that this is responsible for the extreme political partisanship in the United States today, and it can also lead to a large amount of discrimination. Social loafing and de-individuation. So social loafing is a reduction in individual output when contributions are pooled. So this happens when an individual performance is not separated from a group. So for example, there's 4 people giving a presentation and they all get the same grade no matter what. So likelihood increases. So the likelihood to loaf and not do anything increases as the group's size increases. And de-individuation is situations when a person feels a sense of anonymity and therefore a reduction in responsibility and sense of self. And that causes mob or riot-like behaviors. The 5th section is about prejudice and discrimination. So prejudice is a negative attitude or feeling towards someone based only on their membership in a certain social group. An example of this would be, I hate Packers fans. So a stereotype based on this, stereotype is a belief or assumption about individuals that are based solely on the membership within a group. So if I thought I hate Packers fans, then that would cause me to have the stereotype that Packers fans are obnoxious. And then discrimination is a negative action toward an individual because of their membership in a group. So I would never become friends with a Packers fan would be an example of discrimination. So the types of prejudice and discrimination. Racism is very prevalent. It's prejudice and discrimination against someone based on their membership in a racial group. So most people don't show racial bias with explicit attitudes. So you're not going to see, for the most part, people like beating up other races because they're from other races. But implicit attitudes often provide mild racial prejudice. So they won't even know, but a lot of people are racist just subconsciously. And then sexism is prejudice and discrimination against someone based on their sex. So their gender role expectations is an example of that. Ageism is another type, and it's prejudice and discrimination against someone based on their age. So this typically occurs against older adults, but it can also happen against younger people. And then homophobia, which is prejudice and discrimination against someone based on their sexual orientation. And this one is arguably most widespread, and a lot of people still share those values. Self-fulfilling prophecy is an expectation held by someone that changes their behavior in a way that tends to make it true. So when we treat people based on their stereotypes, it can influence them to act that way and like confirm our beliefs. So an experiment showed that students whose teachers expected them to perform better, they perform better. So confirmation bias is when we seek out information that confirms our beliefs and we ignore evidence that contradicts them. So this is a little graphic that shows this. Our beliefs and facts and evidence, when they overlap, that's when we believe them. But when they don't overlap with our beliefs, then we just completely ignore them to just try to be right. In-groups and out-groups. So an in-group is a group we identify with or belong to, and an out-group is a group that we feel is fundamentally different from us. So in-group bias is a preference for our own group over others, and this can result in prejudice and discrimination. So scapegoating is blaming an out-group for an in-group frustration or being blocked from attaining a goal. And this is called scapegoating because back in the old days, they used to put all their sins on a goat. They blamed all their sins on a goat. That's what I'm painting up here. So chapter 6 is about aggression. Aggression is seeking to cause harm or pain to another person. Hostile aggression is motivated by anger with intent to cause pain. So an example of this would be a bar fight. And then on the other hand is instrumental aggression, which is motivated by achieving a goal and doesn't necessarily involve the intent to cause pain to others. So an example of this would be a contract killer who kills for hire but doesn't really want to cause, I shouldn't say want, but doesn't like causing pain, I suppose. Just doing it for the money. So the theories of aggression are the evolutionary theory, which is that aggression serves to display dominance over another. And this is derived from that men are more likely than women to show aggression. And this is because what they think that is for the males to protect themselves or to perpetuate the genes. And then the frustration aggression theory is that when we're prevented from reaching a goal important to us, we become frustrated and aggressive, such as road rage, in which our goal is to reach a destination and then we get cut off or whatever. So that's hindered, so we become frustrated. Bullying. This is repeated negative treatment of another person, and this could include physical, verbal, or psychological attacks. So the gender differences in bullying is that boys are more direct and engage in physical aggression, and girls are more indirect and engage in social forms of aggression, such as rumors. So bullying can cause decreased mental health and also may cause the victims to underperform in schoolwork. Cyberbullying is bullying intended to cause psychological or emotional harm to another person. So the bully in cyberbullying is typically anonymous, and approximately 3/5 of teens have experienced cyberbullying, and this is more common in girls. It often has the same effects as traditional bullying, so you'll feel the same sadness, possibly underperformance in grades. Bystander effect is the phenomenon when a bystander does not help a victim or person in distress. So an example of this would be the murder of Kitty Genovese, and people in her apartment all heard her scream but didn't help or call 911 because they figured someone else would do it. And then the diffusion of responsibility is the tendency for no one in a group to help because the responsibility is spread out among them. And then the seventh and final section is prosocial behavior. So prosocial behavior is voluntary behavior with the intent to help others. Altruism is the desire to help others even if the costs outweigh the benefits. So that would be an example of prosocial behavior. An example of altruism is first responders at 9/11 helping the victims. So the theories about altruism, why we do it, is because of empathy, which is understanding someone's perspective, putting ourselves in their shoes, and then also that some people believe that altruism is selfless and not motivated by benefits from the helping, but others believe that altruism is self-serving because we receive benefits and our ego is involved because we feel better after helping others. So for forming relationships, the large influences on forming relationships are proximity and similarity. So proximity is who you spend the most time with, and this is the most important out of any, because obviously who you spend more time with, you're going to become closer to. And then similarity, you're more likely to become friends with someone who is similar to you. And this is also known as homophily, which is the tendency for people to form social networks with those similar to them. So it's actually there's no evidence saying that opposites attract. It's mainly similar people attract. So important components in a relationship is reciprocity, which is the give and take in relationships, and also self-disclosure, which is the sharing of personal information. So attraction, the universally attractive features for women, the physical ones are large eyes, high cheekbones, a narrow jawline, a slender build, and a lower waist-to-hip ratio. And then the social universally attractive features are warmth, affection, and social skills. And then for men, the physical attractive features are being tall, having broad shoulders, and having a narrow waist. And then social attractive features would be achievement, leadership qualities, and job skills. And then people tend to choose partners that they think have equal physical and social attractiveness. So if you think someone that is much more attractive than you, they're going to say they're out of my league and you're not even going to try to be in a relationship with them. Sternberg's triangular theory of love says that the types of loves can be described by a combination of three components, which are intimacy, passion, and commitment. Intimacy is the sharing of details and intimate thoughts and feelings. Passion is the physical attraction, and commitment is standing by the person. So according to Sternberg, a healthy relationship will have all three of the components of love. So you can see this graph here, the 7 types of love based on the different components. So the social exchange theory, this is that we keep track of the ratio of costs and benefits of performing and maintaining relationships. And people are motivated to maximize the benefits. So normally the relationships where the benefits are greater than the costs are maintained, whereas the ones where the costs are greater than the benefits would be cut off. All right, so that's it. Here's the post-presentation questions. What is cognitive dissonance? What are the effects of de-individuation? What is the bystander effect? What is scapegoating? What are the 3 components of love? What is groupthink? Which experiment tested obedience? And what is a social exchange theory? And pause the video again to try to answer all these. And then I'll reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1. All right, thanks for listening.